Hey there, welcome to another Northern Monkeys video. This is a bit of a different one. We're taking a look at the Nemesis Claw datasheet that just dropped. Getting some first impressions, talking about the detachment and the general sort of play style you want to do with this unit, as well as any leaders. I think it's a really interesting little addition to Chaos Space Marines. I don't think it's going to be necessarily meta-breaking like the Aquilons, but I still think it's a cool unit, and I'm glad that Games Workshop actually gave it some proper rules. So this is the data sheet. It's quite interesting. There's obviously, it looks like there's tons to go through here, but most of it's just this weird thing of like Games Workshop giving stuff so many different weapons. Now, it's 110 points for these five. They've basically they've got the Legionaries stat line, but with one less OC. So they're a little less good at taking objectives and battling over them, which is kind of Legionaries' forte. So that doesn't really matter because Legionaries are kind of always going to be better at that. However, what these guys have going for them is a vast variety of different war gear. They cost 110 points. Now, that's 20 more than Legionaries, and I believe 20 more at the 10-man points as well. They've got that kind of split profile where, because they're so loaded with, front-loaded with war gear, they cost less to have the extra 5 guys on. Like, you get an original 5 guys for 110, next 5 for a mere 80 points. So however, that's because you get a lot less war gear on them. Now, yeah, these guys are kind of sit somewhere in terms of purpose between the more expensive Chosen and the cheaper Legionaries. They do have Stealth, which is a nice little ability. It'll just help make them more durable. I sometimes run a big 10-man brick of Legionaries with a Chaos Sorcerer, and that, the -1 to hit bonus is nice. This one's only at ranged, but still, it's good. It's good for the squad and what they do. Now, they do also have this Visions of Suffering ability. It's a psychic ability, which is weird. This whole unit has a psychic keyword, so watch out for Black Templars and anti-psychic weaponry. The Psychophage will really give this unit the business. But yeah, when you attack, you add 1 to the hit roll if your opponent's below starting strength, and 1 to the wound if they're below half strength. Don't forget that that applies to vehicles as well. So even if a vehicle's just taken 1 damage, it's technically below starting strength, so you get the hit bonus. It's quite nice. And this ability, you see this around a lot. It's pretty easy to proc, like grenades can easily get it against a vehicle. The variety of funny little special weapons these guys get can easily kind of whittle down a foe. Unfortunately, it is below half strength, so if you have to take a 5-man unit down to a 2-man, or a 6-man unit down to a 2-man as well. So it's not like the best in terms of abilities, but it's still worth having, getting all these guys to hitting on 2s, and they have a vast array of special weapons. Don't forget as well, this also can proc in shooting, so you can get all those guns hitting a bit better, which is nice. However, the thing that you really want to talk about with this unit is the Voice Eater. That's the thing to talk about. So I believe this little model here from the Kill Team article, this is the Voice Eater. Yeah, it's basically like some kind of Vox. It's very Night Lords, like Vox, terrifying your opponent. Really interesting. Basically, enemy infantry and bikes can use stratagems while they're in engagement range of this unit. It's really, really good. It's like the key draw of this unit, really. It's what they want to be doing and what makes them actually worthwhile. Like, if they didn't have this ability, they'd be pretty rubbish, I'd say. Now, it stops a bunch of key stratagems. You've got things like counter-offensive, armor of contempt, which is a big one because this unit doesn't have the best AP. Like, that was a real downside when I first looked at them, but if your opponent can't armor of contempt, that's a lot better. Fight on death can't happen as well. If you run a big blob of these guys, you probably can tear down an entire enemy unit. So that fight on death is quite important. There's also funny things like, the units that can move at the end of the fight phase and things like that to get out of combat. Imperial Fists and Red Corsairs have stratagems like that. So there's no ducking away from these guys with a strat in combat. And even things like the Necrons, where they regenerate models back into the unit after they've taken losses with a stratagem. Can't do that against these guys. So yeah, this is the coolest thing about the unit. This just locking your opponent out. And don't forget, it's enemy units within engagement range of the bearer's unit. So if you can hit 2 units, you can lock 2 units out of using stratagems, which is pretty good. And if you've got 10 of these guys, they can string out to a fairly massive footprint. Um, yeah, so yeah, this is what you're here for. It looks really cool. It's very, very flavorful. And you can use little 5-mans like this to support a bigger unit. You know, if you're trying to knock out like 2 big important enemy units on a turn, you can put your 2 big powerful hitting units into those units, and then like one little 5-man of this squad into that enemy unit as well, and you just essentially deny them counteroffensive. So yeah, it's definitely worth using. So they have this massive bit on their this is their war gear kind of section. All these different options, but basically what it's going to pile down to is if you've got 5-man squad, they're going to get a power fist, a plasma gun or a melter gun. They've got the guy with the voice eater, and then a chain glaive, which is like just a higher, slightly higher strength chain sword, and twin accursed weapons. And then if you're in a 10-man, you'll take exactly the same thing, but you'll add in another accursed weapon, a missile launcher, and a bunch of chain swords. Now, the reason I say this is like a disadvantage, not a disadvantage, is because yeah, you're gonna every time this unit activates in combat, you've got like 5 different things to use. It's gonna be just rubbish having to roll all these out, and they're all like 1 damage stuff, so you like yeah, it's just gonna be a pain in the bum. Um, I mean, even in shooting, they can be firing off like a missile launcher, a plasma pistol, some bolt pistols. Yeah, so. But yeah, this is the kind of loadout that you'll want to do. Basically, like the point of taking stuff like the plasma gun and the melter gun is to do those wounds to enemy units so that you can proc their ability and get better combat hits. So in terms of using these guys and their detachment choice and how you play them, just sort of on a first impression look, they don't really have massive synergies with Night Lords, and their detachment rather. I know that the detachment has a few stratagems that revolves around enemy units being below starting strength, below half strength, etc. So I guess there's some synergy there, but it's not like these guys have like battle shock or leadership interactions, you know, which I guess is fortunate probably for the unit because those things tend to suck pretty badly. However, the unit's a primarily melee unit. They do like advance and shoot and advance and charge, so that's where Renegade Raiders and Packbound Zealots come in. That's just, you know, they just give them good stuff, and these are generally deemed to be the best detachments in the army, and it applies to this unit as well, just because of the sort of general purpose of their buffs that these detachments give. They also help with middling AP. Renegade Raiders gives you +1 AP against enemies on objective, and most of this unit is AP 1 or 2, which isn't the best for a melee unit. And then you can also get like the sustained hits on 5s or crits even with this unit. You have like the Nastaman chain glaive that's like sustained hits built in. So maybe in Packbound Zealots, you might actually want to give this unit the Mark of Khorne, just to give them that fight on death, and then you can lethal hits in combat. Maybe that's good, but I still think you're going to want the Mark of Slaanesh on them just for the advance and charge and advance and shoot stratagem. That's kind of the best. Now, the way you run on this unit as well, I think a 10-man unit with a leader in a rhino, it might be good for kind of like if you've got 2 enemy units that you want to knock out, you could basically go with this big 10-man and their leader into one unit, and big unit of Chosen with their leader into another unit, and you fight with the Chosen first, your opponent can't interrupt, then you fight with these guys. Whether or not in practice they'll have the punch to do that kind of remains to be seen. Now, a smaller 5-man with no character, kind of doing early game skirmishing. They have stealth, which makes them a little harder to kill, and they generally, you know, they fight enemy units pretty decently and kind of shut down their any little shenanigans they might have with stratagems. So I could see either of these have been given a go, and they're such a cool like looking unit. If you're into Night Lords, you're definitely going to be trying these guys out. So lastly, for leaders on these guys, Games Workshop basically said there can be anything that legionaries can have, these guys can have, which makes sense. They're kind of very, very similar, but no epic heroes. So no Abaddon with these guys, which wouldn't make much sense, but it's a shame. My first thought was trying to put them in with Lucius the Eternal, just to give them that fights first, but no epic heroes, alas. Um, So I'd probably say the three best choices you could pick for these guys are Chaos Lords. They're always good. They're real expensive now at 90 points, so him with a unit of these guys, probably worth it. He adds so much combat punch to them that like he'll on his own he can crack like harder targets that this unit might necessarily bounce off. However, he will miss the legionaries reroll wounds if he's not leading a unit of them. But I suppose there is something in that if your opponent can't Armor of Contempt, the Chaos Lord goes up to like AP3 base with his Demon Hammer. So all of a sudden your opponent basically can't make armor saves against him. It's pretty good. The Master of Executions, he basically has the same ability as them, but instead of getting +1 to hit and wound, he gets reroll hits and wounds. So there's that kind of synergy of them wanting to do the same thing. Whether or not it becomes a bit redundant, because you'll be hitting on 2s, probably with sustained hits from your Dark Pact. Do you really need to reroll hits? Well, some people do. So if you're that bad at rolling, maybe that's the Master of Executions is the play. And he's a little cheaper than the Lord, and also has decent combat fighting himself with a precision. Sort of helps kill enemy lords if they can't use things like a CP reroll on an invuln save, stuff like that. Now, my I think, like a stealth pick for this guy is only 70 points, so he keeps things relatively cheap in the bundle. The Master of Possession. So he has a decent shooting attack, which can help sort of weaken the enemy unit, get them below that starting strength with his that. +1 advance and charge. If these guys are going to kind of be going for those long bomb advance and charge plays in Raiders or Zealots, then this is pretty good for it, just giving you that extra pip of movement, because the R only moves 6 innately. So yeah, he's pretty cool. He fights okay with them, but I'm not sure whether these guys will just end up being those little 5-mans that kind of harass and harangue enemy units and get the synergy out of that Voice Eater. Because don't forget, even if the Voice Eater is the last model alive out of the unit, like your opponent shoots the hell out of them and they end up with one model left, it's just him, he can still shut down enemy stratagems, even if he's battle shocked himself, there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I think overall it's a good unit. Might not like storm the meta, but that's probably a good thing. We don't want every one of these little kill team releases to just be completely busted like Aquilon's. So thanks for watching. I hope this was insightful and gave you guys stuff to think about. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I might try and do some more of these little off-the-cuff first impression stuff as things come out. They're always giving these kill teams data sheets and things like that. So yeah, thanks. Bye.